I am harvesting water that flows down off the roof into rain gutters, and that empties into a downspout, goes down to the ground, and then it goes into a drainage swale. And when you think of a drainage swale, think of a rocky creek bed that's dry most of the time. And
Hmm.
what are the rocks doing in there? The rocks are like an obstacle course for water. We want water to slow down, spread out, and sink into the ground. And the reason for that is because in urban environments like Tucson, when it rains, we get a lot of rain all at once, like 1 or 2 inches. And in urban environments, more than half of that water becomes runoff that floods our streets and our washes.
Over the past few years, I've become absolutely obsessed with rainwater capture as well as overall water harvesting, specifically from some gray water systems that go into different parts of my garden. I'm very excited because this week we have Martha Retallick on the show. She's the author of the new book, City Nature, which really explains the rationale for water harvesting and how she puts it into practice. So, Martha, really excited to have you. I'm really obsessed with this. So I'm glad to be talking to an expert.
Well, you're going to hear for another obsessive person. And I got into water harvesting kind of the back way. I bought my house in 2004. I was a single woman on a budget. And I'm from Pennsylvania. So, being from Pennsylvania, I wanted to have trees in the yard. But there's one problem with that here in Arizona. You got to water them. And since I was on a budget, the monetary type, I could not afford to install an irrigation system that's connected to our municipal water supply. So instead of that, I planted a yard of low water use trees and shrubs, some of which are native to this region, others come from places like Australia and Africa. And over time, I have been able to water these plants using the great watering can in the sky, rain.
There we go. That is really cool. So are you still operating on just the rain, or do you now, as maybe the budget has expanded, do you now have an irrigation system?
For the landscaping plants in the yard, they continue to live off of the great watering can in the sky. I have since installed 2 raised bed gardens, and I also have 3 fruit trees. Those use harvested water. The raised bed gardens use harvested water, which I store in a 1,500-gallon Bushman cistern. The 3 fruit trees, a lemon, a fig, and a pomegranate, live primarily off of gray water that is diverted from my washing machine out to them. Instead of sending the water down the drain, they go out to feed this. The washing machine water goes out to feed the fruit trees.
So the way I set mine up with the laundry specifically was to an artichoke patch that, when the artichokes aren't producing, goes into maybe a flower patch for that part of the year. But that's been really great. I mean, I have not had to water that one bit from any sort of municipal water source. Of course, technically the laundry is, it's just been used once. And then the shower gray water I set up, which is both my indoor and my outdoor shower, goes to the same area, will go to my fruit orchard, which does get some supplemental water, especially during the summer. But given that I take an outdoor shower once or twice a day, it's getting a majority of the water directly from that gray water system. And it's been, you're in Arizona, I'm in San Diego. Both of us, it's not like we're plentifully drinking from the great watering can in the sky all the time as far as our rainfall levels. So, how has it impacted you growing up in Pennsylvania, but now living in Arizona? Like, the need for water harvesting is probably much greater there.
It's much greater here. I say at my place, water harvesting has made possible my urban oasis with the landscaping plants that live off the great watering can in the sky. And since I am named for a victory gardener who fed 8 people from her garden in upstate New York, Buffalo, New York, and according to my mother, people depended on great grandmother's produce. So, with that in
Hey.
my DNA, I've got to make gardening work here, even in Tucson. So, I have the 2 raised beds, and right now it's water, 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 water them with the cistern water until it starts raining, because I'm growing hot peppers, serrano, sweet reds, sweet bells, sweet greens. Um, let's see, sweet potatoes, a lot of sweet stuff out there,
Yeah, yeah.
cantaloupe, and this is the time of the year where the plants they're building their structures. They are flowering, but they keep dropping the flowers because it has been stupid hot here. But our forecast is supposed to change for this weekend, so I'm expecting to start seeing fruit setting taking place in the vegetable garden. Now, of course, in the fruit trees, well, my poor little figster, it sits out in the sun. It's really struggling this summer. But the lemon tree is setting fruit, and so is the pomegranate. The pomegranate fruits that are doing the best are the ones that are not exposed to the east in the morning because they are really getting roasted. But pomegranates and lemons are fruit hiders. The
Good.
figster, it shows its fruit out in the open. It's been a hot summer, so that fruit has been struggling a bit. I'm expecting more toward fall that these trees will all be more successful.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Have you noticed a trend, I suppose, in popularity of water harvesting? Is it becoming more
Yes,
popular over time?
yes, it has become extremely popular here. Now, when I moved to Tucson, I moved to Arizona full time in 1987 to Tucson. And back then, it was still very much the mentality that I experienced in Phoenix when I lived in Phoenix for winter of 81, 82. Just plant whatever you want, put an irrigation system in, no big deal. It gets a little hot here in the summer, but hey, why not have a lawn? And then I moved to Tucson and I noticed, well, where are the lawns here? And my first
Well,
full time job boss said to me, Martha, this is a desert. So lawns, no. But I noticed that, let's say that gray water harvesting, which we just mentioned, wasn't officially sanctioned. My landlady was doing it by ever so secretly attaching a hose to her laundry drain
good.
line to water the tomato plants. And she had some good tomatoes, but back in the 1990s, you didn't dare tell the city of Tucson or Pima County about this. Nowadays, there are rebate programs. The city and the county are encouraging this because we got to save water.
Yeah, I've noticed in San Diego. I mean, I wasn't really old enough to know whether there was or wasn't a rebate at the time, but there definitely is now. Both on the laundry conversion, I believe it's a $450 rebate if you show proof of install, and I think you can also get a couple $100 credit against a cistern or a free 1 to 2 rain barrels. I think just like a gutter spout connected rain barrel. And so yeah, I mean it's becoming way more popular. What's your thought? Someone's listening says, "Hey, I live in Washington. I live in an area with 50 inches of rain. Is water harvesting still super important there, or what would you say to that person?"
I'm going to hark back to my childhood days in Pennsylvania. Um, we had a disdain for tap water that was just off the charts. And it got even more so when I became an adult and was going back to visit my parents. My mother refused to drink the tap water. It had to be seltzer water from the grocery store or nothing. So, water harvesting for drinking water could be a possibility. And here's another thing that's already happening, it's being used in the brewing industry, beer brewing.
I mean, I think if possible, it'd be great if we could just sort of drink water, right? I mean, what a world it would be where if we didn't have to drink the sort of treated municipality water. So maybe a good case if you're in a rainy area to work on that.
Well, there's an organization here in Tucson called the Watershed Management Group. And they did the landscaping for my yard, and they also installed the cistern and the gray water system. They have periodic community events, and in the evening, they usually have a bar. One of the other drink choices that you can enjoy is harvested water, rainwater, from their property. They have 1,000-gallon subterranean cistern. It's below the patio. They just installed another above ground 10,000-gallon cistern. The aim there is to go completely off the municipal water grid. And I gotta say, this rainwater is really good. Now, I wanted to caution people, if you're harvesting rainwater, don't just go up to your cistern, put a cup underneath the spigot, turn it on, and go slurp, slurp, slurp. You really ought to test your water. And the reason for that is you will probably need to filter something out. And if you get the water tested, you'll know what filtration you need to do. And if you've had any experience with drinking from a well, using a well to supply your water needs. This sounds a lot like having a well because it is. You need to know what's
Hmm.
in that water so you can filter it safely for potable water, aka drinking purposes.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So, Martha, besides the gray water laundry system on your property, what other harvesting techniques are you personally using?
Gray water and the rainwater. I like to do what has been referred to around here as bucket and chuck it. Took a shower this morning, and taking a shower, you got to get that water just right before you step into the shower. I put a bucket under the tub spout, do my mixing there. When I got it just right, I take the bucket out, take my shower, and then it's time to go water one of the plants. And this morning, the fig tree, got about gallon and a half of water. I hope that tides it over until this weekend because I gotta confess, earlier this week, poor little figster looked really bad. I filled up the watering can with some city water and gave it some drinks, and it does look better now. But right now, we're in that great Arizona summertime activity called waiting for it to rain.
You were telling me right before we started the show that it looks like it's on the forecast, right?
It looks like it's in the forecast, and I've noticed this week I rain log through rainlog.org, and I'm also a member of CocoRa's Community Cooperative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, and I do a report every day. And I've noticed with my CocoRa's report, I have reported some rainfall just about every day this week.
Hmm,
Oftentimes it's just a trace, but it's been like, 900ths of an inch day before yesterday, so it's coming.
that's good news. Now we're getting into some of the more specific methods and approaches, starting with what is called passive water harvesting. So, how would you define what that method is?
Okay, passive water harvesting, when you look at it, it just sits there. And another way to think of it is earth sculpture. And at my place, that means in my front yard, I am harvesting water that flows down off the roof into rain gutters, and that empties into a downspout, goes down to the ground, and then it goes into a drainage swale. And when you think of a drainage swale, think of a rocky creek bed that's dry most of the time. And
Hmm.
what are the rocks doing in there? The rocks are like an obstacle course for water. We want water to slow down, spread out, and sink into the ground. And the reason for that is because in urban environments like Tucson, when it rains, we get a lot of rain all at once, like 1 or 2 inches. And in urban environments, more than half of that water becomes runoff that floods our streets and our washes. So, with the passive water harvesting, with the sculpting the earth, we're getting it to slow down and stay around and not cause a flood. So, okay, we're starting out into that swale. Then the water goes into a basin that can hold 250 gallons. That's how much you would get off of my 500 square feet of roof on the front during a 1 inch storm. Okay, rain. It's not going to say, okay, 1 inch, we're done, bye. Rain is just going to keep happening until it stops. So I have a second basin for overflow, and there's a little pathway, little low pathway between the two basins. If you look at the system from above, it looks like an hourglass. So I can harvest 500 gallons in mulched basins. They have wood chip mulch in them. The mulch is there to slow the evaporation of the water and keep it in the ground and soaking down into the water table a little longer. And then at the edge of my yard, to keep the water from escaping into the street, I have a big berm. And think of that berm as like a big hug around the edge of my yard.
I mean, it makes total sense to do this first because, like you said, you shape the earth perhaps once, maybe you make a couple adjustments after a couple of rainstorms as you see how the water flows. And you're totally right. I mean, the more you slow it down, the better off you're going to be. The more you'll harvest, the more will soak into the subsoil, the less you'll perhaps need to supplement fixture with some extra water. And so something that we had done on our property or my property in my backyard, it does have a bit of a slope towards the house, and then that house slopes towards the street just slightly, nothing too crazy, maybe like a 3 foot drop over 150 feet or something like that, but enough that if it actually did rain, it would run off. And so what we did is we cut sort of an S-curved swale pattern in, and then there was an area we thought we'd put a hot tub in. We never ended up doing, and so we had the swale end up in that hot tub basin hole, and as basically that basin idea that you mentioned, and it's been really really helpful. And you mentioned the mulch basin as well. We did not fill up mulch in that particular basin, but it reminds me of a very typical gray water setup, specifically from the laundry system that you mentioned, where you're draining off that laundry water into, what we'll do is we do like the irrigation outlets with the little protective covers, and then we'll do relatively sizable wood chips, maybe like 2-3 inch pieces of wood chip, and we'll replace that maybe every 12-18 months or so. And so this is just another way to do that, but with, of course, the great watering bottle from the sky. What did you call it? The great watering
The
can in the
great
sky.
watering can in the sky.
Yeah, there you go. So it's a fantastic way to do it. So you could get away with this without even having to go into some of the systems we'll talk about later in the week. It's a great first step. And to be honest with you, tell me if you agree, Martha, feels like it would beautify the space as well, because you'd, of course, landscape around that, plant around that, and make it look a lot better.
It has. The thing is, single woman on a budget, moved in here in 2004. I could not afford to do any of these installed water harvesting systems like the cistern and like the gray water. Gray water came 13 years later in 2017, and cistern came 17 years later in 2020. And the thing about when you're doing these earthworks is, well, ideally you want to build the earthworks first and then plant things. Well, most of us just plant first and then do the earthworks later. And as part of the project, I worked with Watershed Management Group, a local organization here in Tucson. They hired a guy to come in with a mini dozer and excavate my front yard. The thing about basins is, a lot of times people think, I know what, I'm going to plant a tree in my basin. Well, bad news. Desert trees don't like getting their feet wet and having them stay that way, which is why in my front yard, the mesquite tree is not in the basin. It is off to one side.
Mm-hmm.
What's in the basin right now? Well, unfortunately, get back to that point about water budget, and I'm letting things live off of the great watering can in the sky. Everything that was planted in the basin died. However, the things that are growing are doing quite well, even though we've had less than 4 inches of rain so far this year. We're hoping that that goes up in the next few weeks, but they're surviving. But the thing is, I want to say this about water budget. This is the water you have to work with. Not everything that you plant in your yard is likely to survive. I'm dealing with this right now. I'm looking outside at an oleander that preceded me. It was planted between the two properties, mine and the city easement next door. I just emailed a local landscaper yesterday. He has power tools. I think it's going to have to come down. The good news is I have 2 low water use plants nearby, a mesquite volunteer, it just seeded itself, and a desert hackberry. And with that oleander out of the way, they're going to get more light in the morning. I think they're going to really take off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really funny you mentioned it that way, because I did the same thing. I mean, I planted and then I said, oh, actually, I want to change the landscape. It's like, okay, it would have been nice to do the latter in the former order, right? But I guess I have to learn, and maybe the next property I'm on, I'll make a smarter decision. If someone wants to just absolutely get started, they're looking at their landscape and they're saying, you know what, it's flat. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. What would be a good way for them to troubleshoot and diagnose how to start even designing a passive system?
You do it like Martha did. I was forced to do something about it. When I moved in here, the ever-efficient neighborhood grapevine told me that in my backyard, which sloped ever so gently toward the house, it would have floods that would come into the house. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go canoeing in the living room. So I set about digging a swale in the backyard that made a right-hand turn around the corner of the house and it would come out in the front yard. The trouble with that was it didn't work. I still had backyard flooding. So that's when I started reaching out for help, and I found Watershed Management Group. They came in and did earthworks in the backyard first, which pretty well solved the flooding problem. But I will tell you what really completely solved it, as far as I'm concerned, is in 2020 when they installed the cistern. I'll tell you, 1,500 gallons of water coming off that roof into rain gutters and then plumbing that goes to a cistern solves a lot of flooding problems. I have not
Yes, it
had a
does.
flood since.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that is basically my exact experience as we start talking about active water harvesting. How would you differentiate the two? Because one might say, hey, passive, I still had to dig the swale, I still had to dig the basin. Like, is that not active? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, active water harvesting features, unlike passive, they are human made and they don't blend into the landscape the way a passive water harvesting landscape does. A cistern is quite noticeable. I've got a 1,500 gallon cistern. The company name is Bushman. That thing stands out. And another thing about active water harvesting systems is you don't have to wait for it to rain in order to use them. Uh, I get out early in the morning, like the 5 a.m. hour, to water my 2 raised bed vegetable gardens. I can use that active water harvesting system then, or I can use it at 5 in the evening. All I have to do is open that ball valve. I connect the ball valve with a short hose. This is the kind of a hose you use for laundry supply line for your washing machine. And
Okay.
that goes into a watering can. And I fill up the watering can and take it to where it's needed. Not the fastest way of watering, but it's kind of like a morning meditation for me to fill up those cans and take them over. First, I start with a small bed with the sweet potatoes, and then I work on the big bed, which also has 4 oyas in it. Those are ceramic, un, unfinished ceramic containers that you pour water into that soaks into the ground beneath the soil. So it's my morning meditation to fill the oyas, not every day, but at least twice a week. Water the gardens and then, get everything get everything closed down. One of the things that's very important about raised bed gardening here, any kind of gardening here, especially in the summer, is you need to shade your garden. And I have a total of 5 shade cloths over these 2 beds because the sun here is so powerful. So I do need to um, remove some screws from magnets so I can get one system open, the big bed, and I also have to move a shade cloth out of the way. In other words, disconnect the magnet from the shade cloth support on another one. So there's a little bit of doing, but it's my morning routine. It's a meditation of sorts. And one of these days, those darn gardens are going to produce something.
Hey, I think they will. With that much love and care going into it, it's sure to succeed. Something I've been doing, Martha, with the cistern that I've got, the way it works is off my roof, which I have a flat roof, and so it all slopes backwards, all sort of collects in one spot. Which again, in a really heavy rain, it will overflow that system. The throughput's not enough, and that's kind of unfortunate. But I didn't really see a way to kind of program around that, unfortunately. But what'll happen is there's a first flush filter coming off. There's a leaf filter, then a first flush. And so you're totally right. Like, it doesn't have to rain for you to be able to use it because the dew will actually roll down off the roof. And over some days, it will collect. And it's the first flush filter, I can drain that into a bed or into a can and then bring that can elsewhere. And it's a really clever way. And honestly, you'll get 5, 10, 15 gallons worth of water if you want to do it that way. Plus, it's just a good habit because what I found in areas like ours with spotty rain, it's easy to forget, oh, I should actually be clearing that first flush because if it's full, well, when it actually rains, the first flush isn't going to flush anything, right? And so it's a fun way to steal a little bit more water. Question for you though, on the cistern install, cisterns versus barrels, what's the difference? How would someone determine which one they should get started with?
Well, the thing with barrels work well if you're harvesting water from something very small, like maybe a tool shed, or if you want to really get creative, the doghouse. Um, in my case, where you have 500 square foot of roof on the front and the back, and I just measured the porch roof on the east side, the west side of the house, because I've got a case of cistern lust. If I can make city nature successful, I'm getting another cistern. So, okay. The thing is with the barrels, if you're harvesting off of a big roof, you're going to need to daisy chain a lot of them together, or else you're just going to max them out. And the other thing with cistern, just like what I said with the passive water harvesting, you need to plan for overflow. My cistern, 1,500 gallons, 250 gallons in a 1-inch rainstorm, 6 inches is going to fill that thing. Well, what happens if we get past 6 inches? That's something that happened this winter. We had 3 snowstorms, and there's nothing that will fill up your cistern faster than meltwater. So I have a little overflow basin out back, and to my utter shock and total amazement this winter, that thing filled up, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is going to visit the neighbor's yard. They may not be happy. Fortunately, the snow melted off the roof. That was it for the basin. The water sank into the ground. We were good.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah, I've tried to figure out what to do. I mean, it's very rare that we would overflow our system. I have a rainwater barrel on the front small patch of roof to cover that area, so that doesn't route through to the cistern. Most of the roof does go to the cistern. The cistern itself has an overflow that'll flow out into the orchard that connects to the gray water shower I mentioned earlier in the week. So I have a dump sort of. It's very rare, again, that even the cistern would overflow because I'd have to get 5,000 gallons and not have used them before the next rain, which weirdly this year actually did happen because we had so much rain in spring that the cistern filled, but the ground was too wet to want more water. So it was almost like when you have it, you don't need it. When you don't have it, you need it sort of problem that we were running into. But now as we get into the later bits of the summer here, I still have a few thousand gallons in the cistern that I've been pulling from, and it's become really, really useful. So it's a fantastic way to work the garden, and it's honestly so satisfying. I'm sure you can agree, Martha, about just watching the system at work and watching water and resources really get collected. You get to better purpose them in the garden to get a harvest for yourself, or even just to save some money. If you're working on a budget, you don't want to blow all that water on or all your money on the water bill, right?
Right. Well, right now I'm playing cistern chicken.
Yeah.
After that beautiful winter with the 3 snowstorms and the filled up cistern, I'm down to somewhere between 400 and 500 gallons. And filling up those watering cans is taking some time, to the point where I think, well, I'm filling up a watering can. Can I go into the house and get something and come back out before it's full and overflowing?
Yeah.
So I run into the house. Like this morning, I needed my measuring tape or something, came back outside, and that can was only half full and filling very slowly. So there's that. And there's also the fun of, oh, okay, we just had 1/3 of an inch. Ooh, that's about 70 gallons. That'll probably last me a few days.
Yeah.
Think we'll have more rain?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I totally agree. Like, when you start getting down to the bottom of the barrel, quite literally, you do start playing some of these negotiation games. But man, I have to say, it's so satisfying and so fun. We have this pond we've installed in the backyard, which does act as, effectively just a natural capture point, right? Because the water is going to be generally draining into that pond ecosystem, and there's an underground reservoir for it, so it helps protect from evaporation, which is really nice. And so what I've done is I've figured out how to link the cistern to the pond to fill the pond back up from the cistern water, and or vice versa if I have an overflow in the pond. And the pond also has an overflow valve that I can turn on that will shunt it to one of my oldest sort of fruit trees, my loquat tree, that you could throw 50 gallons on it and it would say thank you, once a month or something like that. So it's been fun to kind of play around with the math and the art, I suppose, of cisterns. And for those listening who want to get into it, I would recommend checking out your local municipality. Oftentimes there are rebates, especially in areas like Martha's and myself, where rain is a bit hard to come by. You have your laundry gray water system. Do you mind just kind of taking us through the basic setup?
Okay, I have gray water harvesting off my washing machine. And what that means is instead of sending water down the drain and into the county sewer system, which I can do, I can divert that water via a two-way valve, as a plumbing valve that I had installed, to another drain pipe that goes out of the house and connects with irrigation lines that go out to 3 fruit trees. I have a Meyer lemon, a black mission fig, and a pomegranate, and their primary water source is the washing machine water. Now, here's the thing with washing machine water, you don't want to just throw any old detergent in there. I would very strongly recommend read your ingredients carefully. A lot of detergents, a lot of soaps have sodium in them, and that's not good for plants. Don't ask me how I know that. I've made that mistake. Nowadays, I like to use a laundry soap called Oasis, which is formulated specifically for water harvesting. My plants love it. And I mentioned that this is going right straight out to the plants. It is not being stored in a tank. Please don't store your gray water. You will be calling that tank the stink tank before you know it. Standing gray water off a washing machine does not smell good. And I know this from accidentally cutting into one of the irrigation lines. Unfortunately, I had a handyman over at the house one day, so I had to go inside the house and say, Jesse, could you fix this cut in the irrigation line real quick? And he did. It's held up very
Yeah.
well, but oh, the smell. So anyway, just get that right out to your garden right away. The soapy water, the rinse water, your plants will thank you for it. And the thing is with my plants, these street fruit trees, when I had the pomegranate planted, when I had the gray water installed in 2017, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to like pomegranates. And for the next 4 years, I was very annoyed at this tree because it kept growing and dropping things that looked like fruit, but it didn't produce any. Finally, in
Mm.
December 2021, I found it, the one pomegranate. That thing was it was delicious. And last
Are we
year
living the same life, Martha? I feel like we're living the
that
exact
tree
same
went
life.
yep. That tree went to town last year, and let me tell you something. I am the biggest pomegranate fan around. This year, it's got a pretty good crop on it. I'm thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be so good this fall. I can't wait."
It's so funny because I have pomegranates. I have two. I have a wonderful variety and a Parfianca variety. And the first year, they rocketed up in growth. But like you said, they're sort of shy. The fruits will hide. It's hard to find them. Weirdly, because it's that beautiful purplish pink or reddish pink, you'd think against the green leaves it'd be easy to see. It's not for some reason. It's hard to detect. But the first year, I had the same thing. I had a lot of flowers, beautiful sort of waxy flower that would then just fall off and be like, oh, come on, just give me one. This year, I'm going to have more than one, but last year I had my first one. It's kind of similar to you. And that first cut in, you're just like, oh man, it's exactly like I thought it would be. It's so rewarding. And that came off of, in my case, it was the shower gray water system, not the laundry one, but similar idea there. And it's funny you mentioned Oasis as the detergent, because I'm sure you get the question, well, won't that kill the plant? Like you're going to be using detergents and soaps. Like, I don't want soaps. No, thank you. And I'm like, okay, clearly if I put the process in to install a gray water system, I've probably also thought about the detergent. People will assume you're just using the same thing. And Oasis has been my pick as well. I finally got through my first bottle of it because it's heavily concentrated. And so we're finally on bottle 2 of Oasis. But yeah, my artichokes seem to absolutely love it. I haven't noticed any sort of flavor profile difference. It's been a really wonderful addition to the garden, and almost no skin off my back as far as the laundry goes. The laundry is totally fine.
Oh, the laundry's doing great here, and the thing is, um, it's not it's like I thought, "Oh, gee, what if I'm going out and doing yard work and I'm getting my clothes really dirty? Is this stuff gonna work?" It does.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you get this sense that like, okay, it's, watered down detergent. It doesn't do the job, but it definitely does. I haven't, like you said, I haven't really noticed any issues. So do you have any other gray water, or is laundry the system that you're using primarily?
I do the dishes. in a
Mhm.
little bucket at this time of the year, and I like to say things to myself like, "Oh, I need to wash the dishes for the lemon tree. The lemon tree could use a little extra water. It's been about 4 days since laundry day." So I'll do things like first, if you have any sort of thing that you had with salt, like maybe you had, what if you had popcorn? Well, put that dish aside. Don't wash that in the bucket and put it out on the plants. Um, Wash the things that haven't been exposed to salt, rinse it off, and then take the bucket out to the lemon tree. So another bucket and chuck it thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of my friends will do that off of the sink. I have a bunch of friends who, because I think technically sink water, dishwater is considered black water, right?
Yes, it is.
Technically.
If you're doing like, okay, I had scrambled eggs this morning and I just washed that before we started this recording, that went down the drain. I did not take that water out to the plants. That was greasy. It was buttery. They don't like that. So that's black water. Another form of black water is toilet water. Let that go down the drain. Or
Yeah,
if you're
that
in
one
the
seems
season,
self-explanatory.
right? Or if you're in the season of life where you are washing diapers, that's not the season of life. Be sending that through the gray water system out to the plants. Let that wash go down the drain.
Fair point. Fair point. And again, for you, did you get a rebate sort of setup going when you installed yours in Tucson?
Oh, I love rebates. I got rebate for the gray water. I got rebate for the cistern. Think I also got one. I'm pretty sure the city of Tucson. I just got an email from them. I think they now give rebates for earthworks, and I seem to recall getting one. So I'm a gal who loves rebates, and with that second cistern I've been jonesing for, I'm thinking, I want to go for a rebate on this one too. I love incentives.
Yep, same here. I got my $450 one for the laundry system. I think, you know what? It might have changed. I think they might maybe just reimburse me for the three-way valve, the toggle between the sewer and the gray water. But either way, I'll take what I can get, right? And
Yes,
I even thought about it, Martha. I was like, why don't new home builders built-in gray water capacity for showers and laundry systems just as a matter of course? Like, we're going to move into a future where water's going to be relatively scarce, I would imagine. Um, it just seems smart to do this as a home builder.
I believe that has been part of the conversation in Arizona. I don't know if it's required. I think it's a darn good idea, but there again, you need to educate the home buyers to use the proper soaps and detergents. You don't want to be like my neighbor up the street, who, when she first moved into her house, gray watered the privet hedge in the front yard, and as she said, I killed it with Tide.
Yeah, you can't be using the Tide. You got to give up the Tide Pods. Okay, well, gray water systems, my friends, probably the easiest one you can do, especially given the rebates. And there are a bunch of professionals. If you don't want to do it yourself, it's possible to hire someone to help you out. So we've kind of overlooked a bit of your background here, Martha, because while you are an author, you also do quite a bit of other projects and work. And so what's your background, just generally speaking?
I'm a photographer, designer, and writer. And part of my reason for doing the water harvesting fed landscape here is I spend a great deal of time. I'm working at home, I'm in front of a screen. You need to take eye breaks, and I wanted to look at something beautiful. And this
Yeah.
landscape and the gardens here are a tremendous source of aesthetic inspiration for me. To the point where in 2018, I upgraded my camera system, and the new camera system was a challenge. And I bought it in June of 2018. And instead of going out in public and stumbling and fumbling around with it, I decided it is time to open the backyard photography school, learn how to use this thing. So out to the backyard I went, to the garden, to the fruit trees, the natural trees, the cactus, etc. And I figured that after a few weeks of doing this, I'd get bored and moved on to some other topic. And that is not what happened. During that summer, I went back east to visit my elderly mother, who didn't know it at the time, but she was in her final year of life. I took the camera with me and I started going around the neighborhood since mom couldn't walk out of the house anymore. I went out to be her photographer in the neighborhood to show her what was going on. And with all that practice with that camera, I got it. And so mom died in the summer of 2019. And I continued on with this yard. I called it my yard documentation project. And in 2020, I decided to get really serious about it and produce a book. And shot thousands and thousands and thousands of thousands and thousands worth of photos, narrowed them down to just over 60 with a mentor. And the photos you see in city nature are brought to you by water harvesting.
I love it. I love it. It's such a good example of the benefits after you sort of build an ecosystem. Because what you're talking about is not only just harvesting water, repurposing it into the landscape, but what I've noticed, and you let me know what you think as well in your area, is as I've repurposed the water, redistributed the rain, landscaped such that more water is retained in my actual yard, and also had the gray water shunting out towards different areas of the garden. Of course, the garden's more lush now, and it's doing better. And thus, the plants are better. I'm getting the harvests, beautiful shots. If I wanted to take a photo or just sit there and enjoy it, but also the landscape and the nature in that landscape is a lot better. I mean, the artichokes, the passion fruit, which is completely irrigated by rainwater, it would not be there otherwise, because I would say, hey, I think I'm using municipal water for like every square inch of my landscape. It's kind of expensive and arguably potentially wasteful depending on what you're growing. And so what I've noticed from the water harvesting, aside from like the pure practical benefits of cost and time and effort, it's really the beauty of the garden has gone way up, and consequently also the production of the garden. We're talking about an edible setup.
Well, the other thing is when I moved into this place, there was nothing but crushed rock in the front yard and Bermuda grass in the backyard. And in this part of the world, Bermuda grass is an invasive species. I hired a neighbor who was this disabled veteran who did yard work to earn extra money. He removed the Bermuda grass. So I had no landscaping here at all. And as one of my friends said to me right before I moved in here, and I was showing her what I just bought, she said, "That's your palette." How right she turned out to be.
That's really cool. Well, it's been really cool having you on the show, Martha, and congrats on the book. Everyone can find that in the podcast description. Where else can people find your work if they want to connect with you?
Okay, you can go to my main website, westernskycommunications.com. I have a botanical photography portfolio on that site, and you can also buy prints of my work from my site in addition to the City Nature book.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Martha.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much.